Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the event of the European Investment Bank on the climate roadmap, a green transformation journey. The European Investment Bank is also known now as the Climate Bank, and I think it gained that title, or let's say that that title reflects the ambition that the bank set up for itself in 2019. In 2019, it decided to clearly support the just transition to a low carbon, a climate resilient, a just transition, I already said it, and more environmentally sustainable development, and also to support the goals and the objectives of the European Green Deal. Now, the roadmap was established in 2020 for 2021 to 2025, so right now we are halfway through it. And what is really interesting, and I think for everyone who's listening, is to understand the very ambitious targets that the bank had set up for itself. And let me mention three of them. The first one is to increase EIB financing for more than 50% when it comes to climate and environmental sustainability. The second target is for the group to support more than 1 trillion of investments in climate action and environmental sustainability in this critical area to 2030. And the third one is to align all the new operations with the goals and objectives of the Paris Agreement. Now, as I mentioned before, we're halfway through it, and the bank has made incredible progress, not without certain challenges, and that's what we're here today to discuss. Now, since you developed in 2020, the roadmap, things have changed tremendously. At the time, we were in a context of a pandemic, and we're not going to talk about the international context, but obviously it has changed, and equally has changed climate policy, and the market dynamics have changed. And I would like also to mention three key, I would say, changes that affect the bank directly. The first one is around the IPCC, the state of the climate that we are in. On one hand, we have the global stock take, and the IPCC 6 assessment that really points out and underscores the need to accelerate and speed and increase green investments much more than we thought. The second one is that need is particularly urgent for emerging markets, and we need to understand that the context in emerging markets is very different, that they face more constraints from a fiscal perspective, but also to access capital, international capital markets. And the third point is more European, going back to Europe, is that we have more or less finalized the Fit for 55 with all the different pieces of the jigsaw in place with the European ETS. We also have the carbon adjustment, border tax adjustment, and we have the sustainable finance framework, which is almost finished. So we are almost finished. We're still working on that piece, but it's almost finished and it's already being implemented. So with that context, let's go back to the basic, and I'm going to ask you, both of you, to give us a brief, snapshot of the roadmap on one hand, but also for audience to understand the interlink between the European Investment Bank and European policies. Laura, would you like to start?
No, indeed. Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. Now, as you mentioned, I think, why did we decide to start this journey becoming the EU Climate Bank? Well, the key reason is indeed we are supporting EU priorities and turning these EU priorities into investments. And when we started in 2019, 2020, clearly the important priority is explained in EU policies, in particular the European Green Deal. So our Climate Bank roadmap is very strongly embedded in the goals of the European Green Deal to make Europe the first carbon neutral continent by 2050, strengthening and accelerating financing and investments in energy, in sustainable transport, and of course nature and biodiversity. This is one first pillar, let's say, of our climate bank roadmap. And the second one is, of course, as you mentioned, the sustainable finance taxonomy, which gives us indeed a compass, gives us very clear framework within which to establish our own policies.
Thank you, Laura. And because we know each other, I forgot to introduce you to our audience. So Laura Piovesan, she's EIB Director General, Deputy Head of Projects Directorate. And Elina Roine, EIB Director Operations Support and Climate Office. Would you like to complement what Laura has said?
Yes, thank you. And Laura talked about the policy frame and how the CBR, as we call it, the Climate Bank Roadmap, links to the EU policies and the regulatory framework. The document is very multifaceted. It is our playbook, if you will, to transform ourselves to the climate bank. And in that respect, it's not only about policy, it's also about business development. So the positive narrative, if you will. And the roadmap gives us a direction of travel when it comes to those investments that we want to support more. And again, the business development narrative builds on the objectives of the European Green Deal and also builds on the strengths that we have. We are a great supporter of the renewable energy and energy efficiency. I think I heard today that we have supported 1/3 of the renewable wind capacity currently in operation in Europe. It's about clean transport. That is also one of our strongholds, if you will. We want to do more there. But it's also about supporting green innovation. We have heard a lot about how technology and innovation is absolutely pivotal for us to transition to low carbon. The roadmap also speaks about that. And it's not only about climate mitigation, it's also about adaptation and nature. And those are also topics that feature strongly in the roadmap. So when you look at that list of actions and activities, it does give also the frontline teams, the bankers, sort of guidance, what kind of conversations they should be having with their clients and where the investments gaps are and how we could actually address them, including with new product development.
Thank you. We will touch upon adaptation a little bit later because it is true that so many times we forget about adaptation. Is as a common friend of us tends to say, is the sister, the younger sister that always gets forgotten or not invited to the party. But before that, I wanted to touch upon one of the, for me, the most important points of your roadmap, which is the integration of the Paris-aligned, goals at project level in all your operations. How does that look in practice? I mean, how does that materialize? Laura?
Thank you. Indeed, it's one of these 3 commitments to have all of our financing Paris-aligned by 2021, and indeed a commitment we achieved. So, and how did we do that? Now, there are 2 aspects of the Paris alignment and the vulnerabilities. One is the low carbon framework, and the second one is to support investments which are adapted, so resilient to climate changes. When it comes to the low carbon framework, our objective was to create, indeed, a framework which was easy to understand and to deploy both for our bankers and to understand for our clients, and that it was embedded in the objectives of the Paris alignment of 1.5. The taxonomy has helped us in that because for us, we adopted the do no significant harm to climate mitigation as our floor for activities to be Paris aligned. So this gives us a good reference point to start. And the second important element is embedding the right price for carbon. So our model, which is built on UNFCCC data, reflects an increasing price of carbon from 80 euros per ton to 800 euros per ton in 2050. So embedding this in our economic evaluations allow us to take into account indeed the price of the carbon externalities.
And can I ask you, following exactly from what Laura said, whether we're talking about the taxonomy or we're talking about the internal carbon pricing, what are the operational challenges on implementing that, in practical terms?
Well, I think you can break it down maybe to three challenges. I would say first is what I call applicability or translation challenge. So as Laura mentioned, it is of course important that we are able to translate these policies and criteria to something that also our colleagues in the front line can engage with and explain to the clients. I always say that we can have the best and most ambitious policy framework, but if we can't bring our clients with us, we will not become the climate bank. The transition cannot happen. So when we operationalize, I think it's important that we do it in a way that indeed our customers as well as our frontline staff can engage with the criteria and with the in this case the low carbon framework. Secondly, and I think it links very well to this, it's about mainstreaming. So indeed, you have to embed all of this into everything we do, and it's not only the experts, but everyone who have to understand and have to be able to relate to this framework. I would maybe mention here that we have done a lot of work in capacity building. I think over the past 2.5 years, we have run over 150 capacity building and training sessions throughout the relevant services and departments in the bank to indeed try to upskill people to engage with the low carbon framework, with our green definitions, with our path framework, which is the Paris alignment framework through which we assess the Paris alignment of our counterparties, amongst other things. So I think those are maybe for me the key challenges. So the translation challenge, the capacity building challenge, upskilling, and then the mainstreaming.
Right. And a follow-up question, Elina. That training and capacity building is to the staff of the bank, but also to some of your counterparts?
Yes. I think we all recognize that while for us, as the EU Climate Bank and having already quite strong climate credentials, coming to terms with the challenges of the climate transition has not always been easy. So you can imagine that it is not always easy also for our counterparties. And yes, we have recognized that the climate transition is not only about financing, but it's also about upskilling and capacity building, as I mentioned. And here, for example, when we have been implementing our Paris alignment framework, the path framework, amongst our clients that belong to the high emitting sectors or hard to abate sectors, and where we require them to produce decarbonization plans that have credible midterm targets and motivated long-term low carbon pathways, we also provide them technical assistance and advisory to develop those plans. We are also engaging another example with our bank counterparties to help them to come to terms with our green definitions, which are converging with the taxonomy, and build up their own climate credentials also in terms of product development. And here I have to say that we are trying to use also the technology and the digital tools to accelerate that knowledge sharing and capacity building.
Excellent. I have two follow-up questions. One is, you mentioned that you expect in a certain way a credible transition plan from your counterparts, right? Having worked, being part of the UNHLEC on exactly what makes a transition plan credible, I am almost forced to ask you, Laura, what makes a transition plan credible from your perspective?
So our choice when launching with Paris alignment of counterpart, because I spoke before a Paris alignment of projects, and then when indeed moved to counterparts, what is key is two factors. On one hand, to engage with the counterparts that are in sectors which are heavy emitters, to look not only at projects in isolation, but really look at the overall transition plan that the company has. And the second element is the disclosure. So on engagement, indeed, when working with heavy emitting sectors, we ask the companies to produce a plan which has both a midterm and a long-term target, a plan which is credible, and secondly, we ask them to disclose this plan so that we support, increased transparency. This work with our private sector counterparts, with corporates, but also with banks.
Two of the aspects we found very important in a transition plan for making a transition plan credible was, one of them is that they have an actual strategy to phase out fossil fuels if they have exposure to fossil fuels. So I was wondering if you can tell us, the bank's policy on financing fossil fuels, as you're very progressive, I would say, on that front. And secondly, to what extent you would look at that from your counterparts.
And in conjunctions with us, with our decision to transition to climate bank, and when we announced our operational targets in 2019, we also published our new energy lending policy, or revised energy lending policy, and made a commitment that we are phasing out our support to projects that rely on unabatable fossil fuels. And I think we have now completed that phase out. So we are not supporting investments in this area any longer. Under the path framework, we are also cognizant that we don't want to engage in financing entities that are actually continuing expanding activities that are not compatible with the Paris Agreement.
Okay. Moving more, if you wish, to the achievements, right? What have been the key sectors for the bank in terms of scaling up, in terms of the share of green financing?
Well, Elena mentioned indeed that with energy lending policy, we phased out investments on unabated fossil fuel. And in fact, at the same time, in parallel, we significantly scaled up investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and grids. Before the energy lending policies, we were lending some 11 billion per year to the energy sector. After we scaled up to 14 billion per year. So, for focusing on the green segment, green transition, it's also an opportunity indeed to scale up and accelerate investment in these areas. And this is one of the key areas for us. A second key area, I would say, where we see that there is value added from the EIB as the European Investment Bank is on innovation. Europe is really a powerhouse in innovation and in clean tech in particularly, but of course with sometimes Europe lacks this capacity of moving from the research stage to the demonstration and development stage. So investments is needed and specific financial instrument able to de-risk in order to support this translation from research to technologies available on the market. This is another area where I do see big value added from the bank.
Very interesting. At the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance, we're looking at expanding the activities related to research and development, both in terms of applied research, but also in terms of basic research, for the reasons that you just mentioned. We mentioned before adaptation, right? Adaptation, the young sister that never gets invited to the parties. You have set a very ambitious, actually, target for adaptation. We know that it's hard to finance in the capital markets. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's your strategy in terms of incentivizing adaptation? You know, what are you financing right now, and what are the difficulties that you're finding?
As you rightly pointed out, it's a difficult area, but absolutely necessary. And I think what we have set ourselves ambitious targets. We have still quite a long way to go to get to those targets, but we are building the foundation for the ramp up, if you will. We are building capacities internally and also honing our financial and advisory toolkit for us to equip us better to address the adaptation challenge. And there, I would say, we are working on two fronts. And for me, one is again the mainstreaming. So when we are looking at investments, let's say, for example, in the water sector, or when we are financing grids, I think it's really important that we have this adaptation and resilience, climate readiness, preparedness conversations with our clients, and try to ensure that the projects are adapted and that those costs are included in the project. So that is one way for us to support the adaptation investment through our intervention. And of course, then the other area where we can be impactful is indeed to continue supporting both midstream and downstream those more transformational adaptation investments. And it's not to say that the challenges are not there. I think when we talk about adaptation, very often still the narrative is about cost avoidance, which is not necessarily motivating promoters to invest. But we can also help our promoters with data, and again with capacity building advisory to better understand the cost implications and indeed internalize those costs in their decision making and investment decisions. So I think those are few things that we are currently doing. So mainstreaming, indeed data, capacity building, but also then to a certain extent product development, so that we ensure the toolkit is right for our intervention.
Thank you. The European Investment Bank was the first, if I am not wrong, to ever issue a green bond, right? You've been an incredible force of issuing green bonds, and we should recognize the incredible role that green bonds have played in the market and continue to play in terms of mobilizing capital to sustainable investment. Elina, can you tell us, the extent to which you think that the EU Green Bond Standard is going to affect the green bond market, what's the position of the bank, but also to what extent, maybe you would like to extend on what I was saying about the incredible, to what extent it's an incredible tool to mobilize capital flows.
Yes, I think let's think about what has happened in the past, where we are today and where the journey is heading. Yes, the EIB was the first institution ever to issue a green bond, I think in 2007. And since then, we really have become the market maker in the green bond market. I think from 2019 to 2022, the share of green bonds in our overall issuances annually has risen from 7% to 27% actually. So green bonds are one of the cornerstones of our funding plan. And we have seen the green bond market, secondly, really taking off. I think I looked at the numbers and we are, I think, somewhere around 1.5 trillion mark at the moment globally in terms of green bond and issuances. However, the green bond market is still a fraction of the overall debt market globally, so there is quite a long way to go. But I truly believe that we've mentioned it already, that we need to, in order to bring private capital into green, capital markets absolutely have to play a crucial role. We are moving to, in any case, to more disintermediation in the financial markets, and I think from that context also capital markets need to play a clearly a key role. Then your last part of your question, what's lying ahead, and of course as we are engaging with the EU taxonomy, we are aligning already to a large extent our green definitions with the taxonomy, and that journey is continuing as we engage with our borrowers. And I think as we hope that very soon we will be able to issue our first fully taxonomy-aligned green bond that then consequently would pave a way for us to also embrace the EU green bond standard and hopefully become then over time a market maker also in that space.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, because I don't know how many of you are aware of the nitty-gritty between the taxonomy and the sustainable finance framework, but the green bonds issued by sovereigns, sub-sovereigns or supranationals right now are not included in the ratio, in the green asset ratio of banks, because everything that is issued by sovereigns is actually excluded. This is one of the calls of the EU platform Sustainable Finance, that when it comes to green bonds, they're actually recognized and that can be counted as part of the green asset ratio, so those issuers get recognized, right? But at the same time, we also acknowledge that maybe it is not as simple to calculate the taxonomy alignment of a green bond that it is issued by a sovereign or a sub-sovereign. Do you share that vision?
Well, I think there is still, that maybe links to the point that we already alluded to, which is sort of the translation challenge, the usability challenge, and there are challenges as you pointed out. The taxonomy being sort of activity-based, maybe more suited for the use of proceeds type of space. But I do think that hopefully in the future we are able to solve those conundrums and indeed move towards the direction that actually the green investment, independently from who is the promoter, if you will, can be transparently recognized and hopefully then included also in the green asset ratios, because I do think them, having the eligibility to be included also would motivate then the respective promoters to invest.
Absolutely. And I think there's a question mark on the evolution of the taxonomy, the extent to which one day it might be applied more broadly for public investments. Laura, I wanted to go back to the policy, the roadmap. We've talked quite a bit about Europe, and we talk about the counterparties, but we didn't make a distinction between that type of counterparties, right? When they are maybe intermediaries, financial institutions versus maybe other type of investments, for example, investments in developing countries. I wanted to ask you, what are the challenges that you have encountered when it comes to investments in emerging markets?
Yes, no, indeed.
Applying the climate roadmap.
Yes, no, thank you. You mentioned at the very beginning that we have been implementing the Climate Bank Roadmap within a number of changes. No, there have been changes on the regulatory front. There have been changes internally, but we have been driving, and there have also been changes in terms of the engagement of the bank on more globally. And in fact, the bank has recently created a branch, which is called EIB Global, in order to better focus our investments outside Europe. And climate is a key focus in our investment outside Europe as well. Clearly, you are faced with different transition paths. So an aspect which is important and embedded in the Climate Bank Roadmap is the concept of just. No, we want to have a transition, a green transition. This transition needs to be just, so needs to take into account and support accompany the most vulnerable regions in the world, but also communities. And at the same time, also, we have been working on a concept of just resilience, adaptation as well, both in terms of policies, the impact of the policies, as well as the impact of climate change, need to take into account vulnerability, country level and society level. So an important concept when looking out both inside Europe, but also increasingly outside Europe, is to embed these concepts around building just transition for the transition to green, but also just adaptation types of investments.
One of the debates around the sustainable finance framework and emerging markets is the extent to which the new requirements in Europe affect investment in emerging markets. Right? Do you have a view on that?
So as the European Investment Bank, we have translated our environmental and social policy and standards are really embedded in EU policies. So we have already been extending this to outside Europe to investment we support, because as the EU bank, is also not logical to support different standards in environment and social within the EU and outside the EU. So we want to be consistent. So from our point of view, this is not a big change for us, because this is what we have been driving, but we do see that, of course, it's sometimes a big step to take for certain investments in certain countries. But I do see that this is a positive driving force.
I'm conscious we're not running out of time. We still have some time, but I was wondering if we have any questions from the audience. No. Well, as they think of their questions, something to ask them, I wanted to go to deep a little bit more on the challenges around the roadmap, yeah? And I was wondering if the extent to which you have encountered internal opposition, yeah? Having worked for a bank for 10 years on sustainable finance, I know that sometimes it's not easy to implement such an ambitious, right, program and to, in a way, disrupt how things are done.
Yes, that's a very pertinent question, and the answer is yes. We have, of course, encountered some resistance, but I think change is always challenging. You need to learn and you need to unlearn things, and it's always easier to stay with what you know than face the unknown, so to speak. I think what has been really important for us to sort of counter this certain inertia and resistance is that first thing is the top down, so that our management, our top management, our board, our shareholders, they're very clear in communicating the direction of travel and the vision for the bank, the EU Climate Bank, and setting the targets. So the vision was clearly communicated and was understood by the organization. And I think what we did very successfully was that we took that vision and jointly involving large number of colleagues around the bank came up with the roadmap and its implementation. So again, I talk about the mainstreaming, but I think it was important that we brought the climate from the fringes or from isolation to the core of our strategy and our operational plans. And then I think the third point that already I made as well was really to build those capacities, explain why this is important, what this means for us, and try to focus not on the sort of constraining elements that may come with new standards, with change, with new possible workload that the implementation entailed, but focus on the positive narrative, the opportunities that this also offers in terms of business development, in terms of our ability to close those investment gaps and engage with our clients in a different way in supporting them in their low carbon transition.
At the same time, Helena, this is indeed a journey, you know? So it is important in such a transformation journey to be able indeed to take stock and to continue to be aware both of the changes in the market and also, as we were mentioning, in the regulation. So we continue to grow into that process.
Perfect. I think we have a question from the floor.
Thank you very much. I was just curious to know which is the one thing that you've taken from the midterm review process that will inform the next couple of years as we think about what happens next?
So through the midterm review process, we had the opportunity really to take stock of our journey. And at the same time, we wanted to start thinking about what is it that we need to strengthen. One key area we mentioned already, so in the medium term is adaptation, I think should be a key focus for us. No, you don't hear anymore. Adaptation, key focus for us, and of course, fully implementing the taxonomy. These are our short-term challenges. But going forward, the importance of building a framework which measures not only the financial flows to climate, but also the real impact and benefits on the ground in a way that can be communicated, and of course the aspects around the just transition, as I mentioned, so around the people, making sure but this is a transition that works for people.
Yeah. And sorry.
Perfect.
No, I just wanted to add maybe there that when we did our stock takes now, we still found the climate bank roadmap to be fit for purpose and ambitious enough, which I think is an achievement considering, as you mentioned, that the world has changed dramatically since we draw the map for ourselves. So we really were tailblazing in the beginning, as we now still in this environment see that the roadmap is very relevant. But I think going forward, and as Laura mentioned, to be constantly successful, you need to change with times. So I think we have to be very mindful of what's happening in the outside world when it comes to not only to regulation and policy, but also making sure that we stay attuned with the challenges our clients are facing. And maybe here to mention is that in the face of the energy crisis, we have now announced that we will be contributing to the Repower EU with additional 45 billion euros mobilized, hopefully, mobilized financing, EIB financing in the next, until 2027. We are thinking how we can, in this context, also be even more supportive to areas like energy efficiency, and how we can be even more impactful, if you will, in supporting the European low carbon and low and renewable energy value chain development. So we are also adjusting as the market environment adjusts to ensure that we remain relevant and are able to be compatible and additional and catalyze investments in the areas where they are most needed.
And before we take the next question from the floor, I want to highlight what you just said, because I think that we don't give credit enough to ourselves of what we are trying to do in Europe. The whole sustainable finance framework and the climate roadmap, all of them, they are revolutionary, pieces of strategies and frameworks that have never been implemented, and we are learning by implementing them right now. And I think that it's important to recall how progressive, revolutionary, the fact that they are novel, and the fact that sometimes we are, we were wrong in certain areas, and we need to be flexible to adjust them to those learnings, and the changing environment. I think that I can speak at least for the European Platform Sustainable Finance, that we are really now that we examine how not only corporates, but financial market participants, financial institutions, credit institutions, and so forth are implementing the taxonomy and other pieces. We're starting to see what works and what doesn't, what might need a little bit of adjustment, and what actually is great. For example, in the taxonomy, the first year reporting has given incredible and encouraging figures when it comes to CapEx alignment. We've seen that really the taxonomy where it really works is on guiding those investments to become taxonomy alignment. The revenues alignment are better than we expected, but it's still very low. But it is encouraging, At the same time, we have learned in other areas where it's not working, that it might need adjustment. Clearly, we have an issue with SMEs, and that's why now we have developed a simplified approach for SMEs. But before, I continue talking about the slings and arrows of the Sustainable Finance Framework, I wanted to take the question from the floor.
Thank you very much. I am Maria Tapia from the Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative. I was wondering, considering the current biodiversity crisis that we have, how is the roadmap integrating biodiversity? Is it something which is considered at the moment? Is it something that you are considering, I guess, for the next time? Or what are you doing on this field? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's extremely relevant. And so our targets are concern climate action and environmental sustainability. Biodiversity is clearly an important component of environmental sustainability, and as such has been embedded not only on our climate bank roadmap, but also on our environmental policy and standards, where we have moved from a concept of no net loss of biodiversity to a concept of no loss of biodiversity. What is, I think, an important step forward that we are taking here at COP28 is we have been working with the other MDBs to have also a common methodology to track and report nature positive investments and benefits. And I think this is something that will help us also better to increase and further develop not only the financing, but also the understanding of what type of financial instruments are needed to boost investments in biodiversity.
Yes, we have another question from the floor.
Hello, I'm Isabel Delas from Lex Flag. Is there anything that the EIB is specifically doing for the oceans? For the oceans?
Oceans.
Oceans, yes.
No, sorry, it's very noisy. Indeed, as part again of environmental sustainability, we do see this but it is important to target all aspects of the environmental sustainability, including our support to ocean. Again, what is important in this case is to work through partnership, to not work in a vacuum, to not work alone, but to build up a partnership to support investments and the scaling up of investments in this area. So we are working with the other MDBs, but also with national promotional banks and on an alliance and working on supporting indeed more investments towards ocean, whether it is pollution, but also whether it is economic activities, SMEs or larger companies based on oceans.
We're coming to the last round of questions of our event, and I want to start looking at moving forward, right? Looking ahead. The first question is for you, Elina. Is there a trade-off between being the best, being the first, right, when it comes to climate financing?
Well, I don't think there is a trade-off. We were the first. We wanted to set an ambition. We are the EU Climate Bank and wanted to support the EU's climate agenda that also was first of a kind. So we wanted to set the ambition high. But then being the best, you can be the best and then not anymore because you become complacent and or that you don't adjust with the times, and I think that is for us. You can be first once in something, but to be best you need to be constantly striving for that goal. And I think for indeed what we discussed, that now it is to look at that we remain ambitious. We, on one hand, in terms of strategy and vision, and that we at the same time stay attuned how the markets are developing, what our clients are needing, and we are able to be agile and adjust to that. So again, I don't think there is a trade-off, but as I said, you can be first only once, but if you want to be best, you need to be constantly changing, adapting, learning, and making sure that you are providing that value added to your clients and indeed accompanying them on their journey towards that low carbon future.
You have clearly been a role model for many banks and clearly almost like a laboratory, at least for the EU platform Sustainable Finance. You have been the first to implement many policies and standards, and you continue to do so. But you just mentioned adjustments, right? So I wanted to ask you, Laura, how has that original roadmap, right, that you designed in 2020 have changed and adapted to the new context? And particularly, we talked before about the changing context when it comes to climate policies and realities, but what about when it comes to the external geopolitical, right, context?
So, indeed, we talked about the importance of continuing to adapt and change. I think what has not changed in terms of the political environment for what concerns the bank and our shareholder is that there is still belief that there is a strong need to accelerate climate finance, and the bank is well placed to do so. So from our shareholder, when they approved, in fact, in November, the midterm review of the climate bank roadmap, the message was very clear: continue on this road, continue with this ambition. At the same time, I think the recognition that it is important to make sure that also small businesses are not left behind, so supporting them with both advisory through the intermediaries, but also by having an approach which is balanced in terms of the size of these companies, the capacity of these companies, and also the risk that their activities are negative for the climate. So that was the message from our shareholders.
And the next steps?
Next step, we continue on this journey, but we continue learning. And we identified clearly adaptation is an area which is important to learn, build knowledge in terms of understanding what is the impact of the climate change on investments and how can we better mitigate it, but also what types of different tools we need to have to be able to support these investments.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking us in this journey through the climate roadmap of the European Investment Bank. Thank you so much for listening and being with us today. And please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists.